What is the best thing I've ever done in my life? When I die, I will say, number one, I raised a good family, and I lived a good, I tried to do good. Number two, I passed this policy.
And pass that policy he did. That is Nampa School Board member Marco Valle showing his support for Policy 2050. A man who once provided food for the poor while working for the Idaho Food Bank says the passage of this policy ranks higher than that. Critics have compared this policy to that of Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. The Nampa School Board approved it this week, and it restricts teachers from having conversations about gender identity, sexual orientation with any student in the school. And if a student does bring up one of these topics, well, then they're referred to a counselor. Then the counselor then is going to refer that student back to their parents. Timeless circle there. That's a good time to bring in Andrew Bartline following this policy for us this week. So what does this policy 2050 say exactly?
Well, first, it kind of defines these terms that apply specifically, Brian. So we look at these terms individually. It includes gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, and transgender identity. For each of these terms, after they define them, the policy says the district will not educate or discuss any of these topics. And they state it's the responsibility of the parents to have these conversations, which is the crux of this bill and the people who support it. It passed behind a 3-1 vote, though that lone vote that opposed the bill happened to be the only person on the school board who's actually a teacher. Supporters say this policy is about protecting parental rights, however.
There is no place in my world where the school district becomes the parent to that child. They could become the caregiver or the guardian for a certain amount of time, but they do not become the parent if there is a parent for that child.
Now, the point being that these conversations, the district says, should be reserved for parents to manage at home on an individual basis. But the lone board member who opposed, Mandy Simpson, the one who is a teacher, she pointed out not every student has an open line of communication at home with their parents or legal guardians. She sees it in the classroom, and other people out in the community in Nampa, well, they see it too.
The bulk of our age group is about 16, 17. So.
Mandy Oldenkamp works at Clutch,
Director of Operations.
A Nampa-based LGBTQ plus youth advocacy group.
A lot and a little, all in one.
All in 1 year.
And we just wanted to offer a place where there was going to be no judgment, no expectation, just a free space for these kids to be completely comfortable being themselves in their own skin, whatever that looked like on any given day.
Why is something like that needed, I guess?
Nampa is a place where there's a lot of very traditional values and a lot of very tight-knit families, and that doesn't always fit the mold for all of these kids. Some of them are not out in their home life, so their parents aren't fully aware, or maybe are aware and not accepting of who they are. These are kids that feel ostracized by maybe their religious upbringing or the community in which they immediately live, you know, their neighborhoods, their schools, and they just needed a place to come and feel accepted.
The people who support this policy have expressed concern that schools are hiding things from parents about their kids. They're probably going to feel the same way about your organization when they hear what you do.
And that's fair. You know, I think it's important for parents to be very engaged in their children's lives. I'm super involved in my kid's life. My parents were super involved in mine. But that has to be done in a safe and constructive manner. And I would hope that every parent had the tools and ability to do that. And if they don't, that they know that there are resources out there and that conversations can be had in a healthy manner to help make that relationship better.
So here's a copy of the policy right now. Do you talk and work with kids who belong to all of those groups?
Yes. Yes, these definitions represent our entire demographic. Truthfully, the way that this policy is worded, sexual orientation should include heterosexual orientation. So if a teacher is not allowed to talk about sexual orientation, it should be on both sides of the spectrum. It should be heterosexual, homosexual, whatever orientation that might be. But I have a suspicion that that maybe not be the case as it gets implemented.
You don't think sex ed is going to prohibit heterosexual encounters?
I don't think so. So then it does feel like a narrow-minded, discriminatory policy. It feels very much like a portion of the population is just being erased from the schools themselves. And it doesn't make the kids feel secure, it doesn't make the community feel safe. My concern for the kids in this coming school year is that they're really going to feel like they don't have a place and that they don't have a voice within their own school, a place that they spend the majority of their time. So they share a lot about what it feels like to not feel like they're accepted in their own skin, and what it means to really be different in a world that doesn't always recognize different as a good thing.
The policy also aligns with Senate Bill 1100 that passed this last legislative session, and it has been signed into law. That bill prohibits students from using a bathroom outside their biological sex. This policy aligns with that exactly. The district is determining a student's gender based on what they see on their birth certificate, and this policy also outlines compelled speech too, Brian. So hypothetically, a student comes into your classroom and says, I use they, them pronouns. The teacher doesn't have to call them they, them pronouns. If that student had a birth certificate that says they're male, the teacher could decide to use he, him pronouns.
Mandy brings up a good point. How do you teach sex education if you're not allowed to talk about a certain portion of the population? Just pretend they don't exist?
Well, I mean, if you align it and you're not being biased toward one side or the other, like gender identity, sexual orientation, if you can't talk about them at all, I mean, you can't teach those classes.
You can't. It's an impossibility. Thanks, Andrew.